Welcome to the No Longer Rugged podcast. I am your host, Beverly Adeze, and I'm just here to introduce my special guest. First of all, here on this podcast, my goal is really to talk about our old rugged ways of thinking and hopefully share newfound wisdom, but I also want to have fun with it. And so I'm going to introduce my guest. I'm actually going to allow you to introduce yourself because I don't want to mess up and then you be sending me emails. So I'm going to give you the floor. Introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And then we'll go ahead and start.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mrs. International Slave Mamba.
I didn't say it.
So my name is Ada Ari, and I am Ada like you. I am a mom of two very cute little kids, 5 and 3 years old. I'm also an author, so I'm writing books to help my children and children all over the world learn and be proud of the African legacy and culture and all of those things as well. And I'm just a general old Nigerian American who's trying to figure out this life thing.
Now, how long have you been in the States? When did you come to America?
I came to America in 1996 when I was like 11, 12. So you can do the math. That was a while ago. And sorry?
I was 3 when you came.
Oh, yeah. My younger sister was 4. And it's very interesting seeing the difference because I did GS1 in Nigeria. And I feel like that thing just solidified Niger in me versus my 4-year-old, the sister who was 4 when she moved here. She's just like, definitely a completely different type of she's completely Americanized in certain senses, but I
don't know, I kind of wish I would have done. Would you actually send your kids back to do some studying in Nigeria? Or
look,
I wouldn't mind going back to live for a little bit, but I'm saying that now, you don't know.
So I tell you, the way the world is going, there's no like perfect place, honestly. A couple of years ago, I was like, I want my kids to definitely do secondary school in Nigeria because that's when they really get to learn. Like they get the strong sense of identity, strong sense of self. They learn all these good manners. But then the way Nigeria is going these days, and then I think just the way parents in general are these days, like we want to be very close to our own. True. Those are very formative years. So it's a big risk, just like shipping your kids off to a different country altogether. People did it. I just don't know. My kids are 5 and 3. Let's see how we get when they get to that age.
You know what? I feel like I won't say long gone, but kind of long gone are the days where parents just ship their kids off and have their kids living in a whole nother country for 5 years. I think because we have mental health now, we're more aware of certain things. So now we know that it's best to be with your kids. So I don't know if I ever wanted to have my kids go back to Nigeria, I would have to go with them. I don't think I miss that part of their life because they need somebody to talk to. You have to oversee them. You have to see, what are they doing? Be involved in their life. So I don't know if I can just ship my children. We'll see.
I wonder about that all the time, actually. Like, I mean, the way we were raised in, you say, my generation versus the way kids were raised maybe like 10, 20, 30 years after is very different. To your point, there was a lot less hand-holding. And there was a lot of like sink or swim versus now it's like, let's make sure you can swim.
Only for those like years, though. I'm not going to be chasing them when they go to university. I'm not going to be behind them. But I think for that's because they're going through so many changes. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I don't know. I need to be there before they'll grow up and they'll be doing podcasts saying my mommy wasn't there for me. So I know he wants to do that one. But anyway, you were telling me a little bit about your story and you were talking about because I want to go into what caused you to start writing. And so you talked about how you went through a season of depression. And so kind of walk us through how that started and how you got out of it and transitioned into being an author, especially being Nigerian and not doing, well, anyway, I'll let you have the floor.
Sure. And I just want to say I'm a little bit nervous because this is my first time recording this part of my story. Okay. I've talked a lot about, being an author and all those things. And, as a Nigerian now, you're not supposed to say anything other than the positive, shiny lights and things like that. So here we go. I'm a single mom. And that happened kind of abruptly. So my daughter was 2 years old. My son was 6 months old. And I remember I was carrying both of them, one in each arm, because we just returned on a red-eye flight from a well-planned trip. And as I landed, I remember like getting a text, and it was a very weird text. I couldn't quite understand what it meant. But when I came home, I could see that things were missing from like the garage. As I made my way upstairs, I could see that furniture was missing. And then by the time I put the two kids, I still do, I like carrying as many things in one trip as possible. So I was carrying the two kids in my arms. So I put them down to bed, and I found this letter on my bedside table. And it was just very brief. And it was like, peace. Peace, here are the bills, transfer them to your name. You have 4 days. And that was it. And I don't know if it's because, as a Nigerian, even though I had been in the United States for well over 20 years at that point, I don't know if it's because I just genuinely didn't really understand what mental health was. But the words trauma didn't come to mind. The thought of mental health didn't even enter the equation. It was kind of like, this is what's happening right now. And the very next day I had to be at work. I had to get the kids ready for daycare, go to work a full, this was pre-pandemic. So still drive all the way. My commute was now 2 hours. And like with putting the kids in daycare and then going and things like that. And I just remember like, it was weird. It's kind of weird even talking about it now. Like I said, this is my first time talking about this story. So forgive me for being a little bit like all over the place. I definitely didn't think trauma or anything along those lines, but I know I was doing weird things. Like, for example, I just could never predict when I would burst into tears. I was constantly just crying in random places. I remember one meeting, it was just me and this one guy, and we were having a meeting, and I was just saying to myself, I really hope he thinks I have allergies because I was crying. And like, I clearly don't remember what we were meeting about, but I would just constantly burst into tears in the most random places. I remember how many times did I go to daycare without my shoes on? I remember driving, and I'm driving, no phone, no music, nothing, and I'll just swerve. And twice I almost got like T-boned. I don't know why. I don't know what motivated me to do these things. But today, 3 years removed, I can now say, you know what? There was some mental health stuff going on there. I went for my annual physical, and again, I burst out crying. And I guess the doctor there decided to screen me for depression, diagnosed me, and told me to go to a therapist. And I remember when she diagnosed me, I was like, it's you that is depressed. Honestly, that was my initial thought. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But hindsight being 2020, I can now see that there was a lot going on. Like there was just so much that was going on at that point in time. And that's probably why all these different things were happening the way they were happening. And I couldn't quite like make sense of it. Yeah.
Okay. So one of my biggest fears, I'm not even gonna lie to you, is becoming a wife and mother and losing myself. So do you feel like maybe looking back before you received that note on your bed, could you kind of piece something together? Like, okay, maybe, did you ever think that maybe, I lost myself, even before, or there were some things you could have done differently, just kind of looking back?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I'll tell you, like becoming an author kind of segued into this opportunity to do motivational and inspirational speaking. And I love it because I get the opportunity to hopefully uplift people and hopefully give people tools and tips that I didn't have at that point in time. Because my goal, my dream would be to make sure that people don't have to go through the same journey that I went through. I mean, it wasn't really pleasant. I don't regret it. I see why I had to. But to answer your question more directly, I definitely lost myself. By the time I came back into that new reality, I literally felt like I was nothing. I felt like I was worthless. I felt so low that I deserved this type of treatment / announcement / whatever you want to call it. I didn't even think for 1 second, oh, this is messed up. I was like, okay, this is just what I had coming to me. I blamed myself for everything. I mean, I was begging, groveling, and there was not a single point in time when I thought to myself, I deserve better than this. To take it a few steps back, before I got married, I actually had this entire brand of fitness. I was one of the first to ever do workouts to Afro beats. It was Adari Fitness. I had brands like KLM flying me and my team from America to Nigeria to do fitness events. I had Uber sponsoring me. I had all kinds of things going on. And throughout all of that, and I'm sure you can relate as an entrepreneur, we're so deep in the grind. Our heads are so down that we don't even see the greatness that we are creating or what we are accomplishing. And so the entire time, I didn't realize how much noise I was making, how many waves I was making. I didn't even realize I was one of the first to do this. This is before, like, all the YouTube videos you see now and all the Instagram fitness people that you see today. This was way before all that. I was literally doing some groundbreaking stuff. And I didn't realize that I had all that going for me. Taking a few steps back, I'd always battled with insecurities. We all have insecurities, but I feel that mine was probably significantly elevated. I felt like I was the sum of all my inadequacies. I was the sum of all my failings. Growing up as a Nigerian, it was always like, can you not see that person? Does he have 2 or 3 heads? Why don't you have a, first class or whatever grade that he does? And I probably internalized that in a very negative way. Not like I hated my parents for comparing me, but I always felt like I was less than. So, for example, when all my friends were going on to get MBAs and all these things, and I was like, I can't see what I'm going to do with an MBA today. I felt less than because I don't have a master's. When I got my first job back in like 2007, I felt like I wasn't making that much money because all my friends were like, doing flashy things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I must be so stupid and I must just be so unintelligent. Even as a fitness instructor, I'm an African. My body is very African. And I was in this place and I was working out in the Washington, D.C. area with like, people from the Orient, people with completely different body types. And I was always like, I'm not as skinny as them. So I don't even really belong as a fitness instructor. I didn't really stop to look at the fact that I was the fastest or I was the strongest or that my classes were constantly packed. And so it was already like I was building towards that place. I just already had those insecurities. So it was really easy to lose myself completely in marriage where, and this is for anyone who's married will tell you, in marriage, you're going to come face to face with all of the negatives. And if you don't have the at least self-confidence and self-love to be able to say that, yes, I do have these shortcomings, but I'm still worth it, you will absolutely lose yourself.
Oof.
A lot.
I'm just in the film, oh God. I know it's beautiful when it's done right, but man, I just imagine marriage being like the other person can literally see all your flaws. You can see their flaws. My sister, go deal. But
can I tell you this though? Because I still believe in marriage. My parents did not sugarcoat marriage for us. I went in knowing it was going to be hard work. And in some ways, that also helped me kind of take a lot. I'm like, no matter what is thrown at me, I'm going to work at this. I'm going to work through it. I definitely would discourage people from like jumping ship at the first sign of like difficulties, because you're literally 2 completely different people. I don't care how well you think you know each other. You're coming together with completely different thoughts, different ways of being raised, different mannerisms. And there's a lot of compromise, there's a lot of diplomacy that has to go into marriage. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. It's not easy. Like when you go to weddings and you see that they do the who's been married for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It's not because like they've enjoyed a bed of roses. It's because it shows that they have developed the skills to pick their battles, to de-escalate, to compromise, to work together, to work through challenges. That's literally all it's meaning.
They have grit. I think that's really what it is.
Yep.
It does not mean that every one of those marriages is something to look up to, but I do feel like there's some, because you're going to go through something, but I do feel like there's some that's like you can admire. Oh, I don't know, my sister. But because like I said, like you said, I still believe in marriage as well, but it's a risk. And I'm not one of these people that is like, oh, he needs to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect person, but I do believe at the core, you guys should have the same values. But even with the same values, like the same core values, and then talk about different things. How are you going to raise kids? And people are going to, you grow and you evolve. But even if you find somebody that has the same core values, you're still gonna have differences. You're two different people. So, but I do think it's a risk. And I feel like if it's done right, it's a risk worth taking, you know? And so whenever I see people that have been married for 30, 40 years and they end up losing their spouse, it's so sad because you can tell that they lost their other half. But then the beauty of that is not everybody gets to experience 30, 40 years with somebody that truly loves them. So it's a risk, you know, no matter how you look at it. But yeah, so I did want to ask, how did you come out of that depressive state? Like, when did you decide, okay, I'm tired of being here. I don't want to be here anymore. I have two kids. I need to, you know, get back to feeling like myself. How did you do it? And when did you start feeling like yourself again?
So to be honest, I don't think I actually brought myself out of it. I genuinely credit God with just saying enough is enough. Mm-hmm. I very firmly believe that there were tons of lessons that I needed to learn during that period, during that darkness. And that's one of the things that I talk about a lot. When you're going through hell, keep going, because there's so much that can come out of it, so much you'll uncover about yourself, so much you'll get to learn about yourself. I came face to face with my biggest fears. I was so afraid of being a single mother who was not earning how much money am I earning to take care of two kids. I lost my job, by the way. 4 months after he left, my entire team was just like removed. So that happened. But in that season, so I remember being in a place where I was like, I am nothing, I have nothing. And I was expecting everyone to run away from me. But I had to learn that I'm okay just as I am. God literally created each and every single one of us uniquely with unique gifts that we have to share with the world and to make the world or the people we're around a better place or a better situation. But he also gave us all these flaws so that we're not too proud, so we're humble. And then so that we also have grace for others who have shortcomings. I think we don't do that little grace part quite as well. Anyway, that's a whole different discussion. But one day I was just sitting down. I was super depressed. I was always eating. Like, if I wasn't taking care of my kids, I was just like in bed, hopeless, just eating. And my sister was like, what are you doing? You're going to dig yourself an early grave. And I took the chocolate I was eating and I threw it in the trash. And that was it. It has literally been 1 year. I haven't drank anything other than water. I haven't taken any chocolate, ice cream. Like, it's been extreme. And June is 1 year. Yeah. And I say that because I'm not the type that is like, okay, I'm going to quit this today and that's it. It was very random. But I also think that, you know, from a like non-religious standpoint, I feel that when you really heal, it'll take its time. Everyone has their own timeline, but eventually your body will just adjust, your mind will adjust. I don't know if it was like what I was eating that influenced it or if I was ready and that impacted my eating. But suddenly I wanted to move around. Suddenly I feel like my mind was working really quickly. And that's kind of how the whole authorship thing started and just the whole entrepreneurship venture came back around. So yeah, I can't really say that like I brought myself out of it. A couple of things I will say that happened. I had a very strong community and village. I remember my friends telling me, okay, for your birthday this year, let's go on a health walk. To literally just walk 3 miles, right? I had people who would not let me stay alone. I remember my birthday when it happened, I said, no one comes to my house. I don't want to see anyone. And they all showed up. And I realized that actually lifted my spirits. Mm-hmm. Or even when I first came home and I found the letter, no one heard from me. Absolutely no one. And 2 weeks later, people started showing up in my house like, are you alive? Are you well? Mm-hmm. So the importance of community and a village, I cannot stress it enough. And then also, I think just really taking the time to look inwards. So it's not about like trying to pretend like you're okay, trying to put a brave face on. Feel your feelings, sit in that reality, sit in the moment that you're in, and take time to really look inwards. Start asking yourself why you made the decisions you made, why you had the fears you had. Come to find out what this season is trying to teach you in life, because I do believe that every season is there to teach us a lesson in this life.
So you put down chocolates and you picked up a pen and paper. So when did you start writing? I'm sure it wasn't before. Because
so I will say this, when my first daughter was born and I used to read to her, I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember all these stories that I used to hear growing up. And she's growing up here in America, but I wanted her to have the same stories. So that was when I was probably not even in the best mindset to try anything on my own. I don't think that anything I tried would have flourished in that season of my life. But it took me like getting out of the marriage and then getting out of this season to say, you know what, why not? Like, why not try? And so I would say, I mean, my first book I published in February, so it's fairly recent. But yeah, I would say it really took like the 2-3 years after this for me to just try.
Yeah, wow. February 2022.
Yes.
No, that is amazing. Now you say you have, you talked about community. Did you get any pushback? Because
yes. Hello, are we Nigerian?
But I mean, I guess I just assume that you have this good job. At this point, they're probably like, just do whatever you want to. I've given us children. So, what kind of pushback did you get?
Oh, you mean into like becoming an author?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so this is still very much a side hustle. I definitely wanted to become a main hustle, so I'm like hustling my way there. But I've really had nothing but support because I think that the books came out literally as I was turning the page from depression. So there's been a lot of excitement. Like, I'm so happy to see you doing well and also doing amazing things, not just doing well, but really exceeding and excelling. So I haven't really had pushback in that sense. The pushback I do get is when I'm like, I do want to also tell my story about the not so good things that happened. That one is like, oh, no, you can't. Yeah. Nigeria, don't do that. We don't talk about the bad.
And I'm trying to find that balance because for me, I don't just like talking just to talk, right? It's not like I'm just going to come on here and say, actually, even before we started recording, you mentioned that you weren't going to slander your ex-husband, which I love that. That's admirable. And for me, I don't just want to, some people just talk to talk, but let's have a purpose. So if I know that what I'm saying is going to help somebody, then I'll talk about it. But if I'm just talking to talk and I'm just telling you details of my life, this, unnecessary details, then it doesn't make sense. But I feel like us as Nigerians, we could benefit from sharing a little bit more so that it's not just like, oh, Uncle Okechukwu now has this BMW and, but you don't know what he went through to get that, the struggles. He had to walk for a long time. He can barely, I think it would really help. But I think because we're so prideful and we want to have this, picture perfect image. And so we don't share as much. Now, for me, I believe in, waiting until kind of like the end of my testimony to share it. And so there are things that I'm going through now that I'm like, I already know how I'm going to share this. I can't wait to come out on the other side so that I can tell my story. So that's kind of how I see things. But I can tell that you're sharing, but you're kind of like, the Nigerian in me is kind of fighting back. So
no, I would say I'm a complete open book, actually. It's like the Nigerian influences in my community that are hushing me down, if anything. And I'll tell you why. Number one, I feel that there's a lot of healing that comes from venting, letting it out. So one thing about me, and one thing I found very awkward about that season when I was in it, is like, I've never been the kind to hold a grudge. I've always been like very easy at just letting things go. And I couldn't let this thing go. I couldn't quite figure it out. But when I started talking to people, and I was literally just blurting out sometimes because I might just be sitting in front of you and start crying. And then the story starts unwinding. I think I mentioned no one even knew where I was when I came home and found this thing. They had to show up at my house, like, what is going on? And even then, am I still married? Am I not? Like, when you're married, you keep your business to yourself. I really didn't know how to talk about it. But I will say that being quiet, I felt like there was so much more pressure. And once I started just like sharing my story with no agenda, it was still unfolding. I felt lighter. I will also say this. As I started to talk about my story, I realized that I was not alone. And that's one of the things that we lose in our community by thinking that we are alone and not sharing our stories. There's so much healing. There's so much tips and lessons learned and strategies. I'll give you a very simple one. My daughter was like 2 and I was just trying to potty train her. And I was telling one of my friends, like, how am I going to potty train her right now when I have such little time on my hands? And they were like, pause. take 3, 4, 5 months. She will be potty trained eventually. My mind couldn't process that at the time, but it took someone else kind of coming in and giving me these simple tips that may seem so basic. I had friends who were sending me money, who were bathing my kids, cleaning my house, washing my dishes, doing my laundry. If I didn't share what I was going through, there is no way they would have known I had that need. I might not even have realized I had that need, and I was crushing myself under the weight of everything I was going through. People had to step in and say, step aside. The other thing I will say is, and I mentioned this earlier on, I feel that we were raised on comparison. Like I said, like, why are you not like this person? Why are you not like that person? And for me, I just kept feeling like I am less than. So because of that, I was always afraid to talk about my salary, always afraid to talk about like how I really thought about my body. I was always afraid to talk about all the negative things because I felt like everyone else was doing so much better than me. But what I found in kind of being open and being vulnerable is that other people drop down their mask, they drop down their not shield, they drop down their facade. Yeah. And suddenly I started having real conversations with real human beings. And it's been very, very comforting to realize that we're all going through this life. We're all struggling in one way or the other. No adulthood, NASCAR. There's that song. No one is coasting. No one is coasting. Forget what you see on social media. No one is coasting. And by just being aware of how much we need each other, I think we actually can support each other a lot better. So that's something that I'm actually a very big advocate of. And I also try to put out there just like how much of a struggle my life is. I don't try to ever paint it as perfect. You know, I might put, oh, I just got this really great accomplishment with my books, but best believe I'm going to post, I got all these no's. I got all these rejections, so that no one ever looks at me and thinks, oh, she has it easy.
Exactly. And I did a video recently about, bringing back shame. And I think people they didn't really, maybe some got what I was saying, but when I talk about, let's bring back shame in society small, I talk about, it's really about the unnecessary details that, okay, we don't need to know this one person is talking about, oh, I pee at the gym. We don't need to know that, just unnecessary things that we could have been okay with not knowing. But I don't mean that we can't share our story, because I'm big on that, because for me sharing my story is usually a testament of, what God has done or what God is doing in my life. And it also makes you more human. Me, I'm not perfect. So even if you see numbers on social media, people have to, it's a journey. And I think once we share, and even honestly, to be really transparent with this podcast, I am just like, I recorded my first episode in January.
Wow.
January, I think I did like 5 back to back, because I was like, all right, cool, I'm gonna do this. So I did record like 5, but then I didn't release it till June.
Wow.
Excuses like, oh, well, I'm in Colombia, so I don't want to do a lot of virtual. I'd rather do in person. And I think I was kind of comparing myself to other podcasts that were maybe doing in person. And I was like, but I was like, that's not for me. I can still have in-depth conversation. Like I said, what I want to, what you don't want, manage like that. Business. And I think sometimes you're right. We do compare ourselves, and we're looking at how this person is doing it at this person. Well, that's not your calling. That's for them, and that's okay. And so just being completely transparent, even just put in the first episode. I think I posted that poster. I just turned off Instagram off my phone. I even ran to the other.
Yep.
Because you would think that, okay, this person does a lot of stuff with video and TikTok. You would think that it would be easy, but anytime it is a new project, it's you're kind of nervous, you're kind of anxious. But honestly, what helped me to just be like, I beg, manage like that, is one, knowing that I know the vision that I have for this podcast. And I know that a year from now, I'm going to be looking back like, wow. And I posted something on recently, a girl was talking about, don't be attached to what you're creating now. It's just like a stepping stone to what you're going to create later on in the future. And so I hadn't heard podcasters or, people that I even look up to talk about their struggle. I think it was Kevin on stage. He was even talking about how his first few podcasts, he doesn't even talk about it. Like, we don't talk about it, but I'm still proud of what I'm doing. And it just goes to show that you talking about the journey, it helps somebody. It really does.
Absolutely.
And so I will say though, when it comes to your book, what is it? What is your goal for the book? What is your purpose? You talked about it a little bit, so this is where you get to shine. I want to hear about the book. What was the vision? Talk to us. Talk to us.
Okay. So, like I said, the vision really evolved, and kind of like what you were saying, right? You may have this urge, this burning desire to do something, but it doesn't quite look like that person or everyone else. You have a specific calling, you have a specific vision, and it's crazy if you actually sit authentically in your calling, doors just open, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, it would be so cool to share the stories that I grew up with my daughter, with my, she was just my daughter at the time. I mean, I had just the one daughter at the time. And I was in this place of not really feeling, like I said, I struggle with insecurities and all these things, like who dashed me? Who am I to be an author? So I never really chased that dream at all. But it just never went away. And then as I came out of this season and I started I literally came to a place where I remember I was talking to an auntie of mine and she's like, Ada, you don't deserve this. And I said, Auntie, but how do you know? I haven't even told you. She's like, are you kidding me? Do you know whose you are? Like, she literally defined why I am worthy, why I have some self-worth. Okay. And so as I came to to embrace my flaws and see my strengths for what they are, I said, why not? Why not just try this thing I've always wanted to do, right? And the truth is I had only one story in my head, one story I remembered. So I wrote it down literally in 15 minutes. And like I said, I'm an open book. I started sharing it with my friends who were parents as well. One of my friends was like, oh my gosh, I'm from Ghana. I remember a similar story. And the first book I ever actually released is a story from Ghana. And it's the story she told me. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing how when you just kind of authentically sit in your calling, your gift, things just come your way, right? So now I had two stories. I could really brand it as something. And I wanted my kids to enjoy these stories first. But then I thought, my kids are Americans. Let's call it what it is. So if my kids can enjoy these stories, if I'm writing it in a way that they will be able to understand, then any American child can actually get to enjoy these stories. So now I said, let's broaden the horizon. Let's make something that's, we're sharing with all American kids. Then I thought to myself, these are African folk tales that have been passed down for thousands of years, for generations, orally, right? And my child would have lost this story. She would never have had it if I didn't think to do this right now. So think about all the children who haven't seen these stories, heard these stories. You think we grew up on not to name drop, but the Cinderellas, the Snow Whites. These are European folk tales. And because we heard it when we were small children, to this day, it's somewhere in our minds. So if I start to plant these seeds in my kids, they will have it forever. So I decided to be intentional. And I'm the back of every one of my books is going to have the map of Africa with the actual country shaded out where each story comes from. So that now my kids can also talk about Nigeria. So now these are conversational pieces. And then I'm well, you know what? Let's take it a step further. Let's put these cards in here so that they can actually learn about the people who brought each story to us. So each book, you're going to get little, what I call fun fact cards. So they have all these cultural pieces, this story from Ghana. You get to learn about the kente cloth, all these little things. And it was just this fun thing that kept developing as I went along. And then while I was doing that, and before I actually released this, I didn't talk about it yet. One of my sister-in-law, she was working on this brand that I call the Amazon of Igbo kids. So teaching Igbo to young children. She just curated different charts and books and flashcards from all over. And she was looking to see how to expand. So I said, let's come together and let's build something unique rather than pull from different people who already have products. Let's create our own. So my first Igbo books came about, and this, each box has 3 books, one for animals, body parts, things at home. The illustrations are so beautiful. Before we release that one, I'm why stop at just Igbo? If we just use the same images and just translate the words, now we have Yoruba as well. Mm-hmm. So now we have 2 different products. We have additional audiences. And then long story short, we now have Igbo, Yoruba. I've shown you Hausa. We have Ghanaian languages. We have Swahili. We have Amharic. So now we have all these different languages. And my kids are, of course, the best test subjects because Like the packaging was attractive to them. The images were attractive to them. They literally wanted to learn the language because they were so attracted to what they saw. So all of these things just kept falling in place. And I mean, I was interviewed on Fox 5, like all kinds of random things were just literally falling in place. I've had TV interviews. I've had lots of opportunities that you don't have as a first-time self-published author. So I definitely thank God. But again, I don't feel like this is something that I could have planned or orchestrated myself. I think personally, God was showing someone or showing some people that out of the darkness can come some serious light, some prosperity. So when you're going through the darkness, just keep going. Don't be so focused on like, oh, I have to look good, I have to look better. Because when you do truly heal and you come out, you will radiate, you will shine authentically. And I think that's the best way.
And what you said earlier about how it's like this desire, this thing that doesn't go away, that is so real. Let me tell you, I have a testimony that I probably won't even say until 5 years from now, because I believe God planted something, because it's still in the works. And so God planted something.
Whisper it to me, just whisper it to me.
Yeah, you missed it. No. But it's like, it's true. Like, I feel like when God gives you a certain desire, it's either you do something about it or you just live knowing that you're going to have that regret. It does not go away. And so what would you say to people who, let's say they have a book in them, right? That thing is still there. It's not going away. How would you encourage them? Because you think about, when I look at your book now, I'm looking at the beautiful pictures and the boxes and the packaging. And if I was trying to write a book right now, I'd be like, that's too much. You think about the big picture, but I believe all it takes is just put in one foot in front of the other. You figure out, okay, let me get my pen and paper and let me write something down. Next, let me type it up, and next, let me look up some publishers. So how would you encourage somebody that has, that God has planted, that there will be an author, they'll write their own book, but they're afraid or they're overwhelmed?
And I get this all the time. Like, everyone sees me and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to you because I've really wanted to write a book, or I've written a book. I have someone who reached out and they actually wrote and illustrated a book 1.5 years ago. And until we spoke, they weren't ready to move to the next level. Kind of like you were saying, you recorded your first podcast back in January. So what I do tell people is, number one, and no matter what, book or otherwise, fear is an imposter. Fear is an imposter. You will meet the thing that you have feared for so long, and you will move past it. Yeah. I was so scared of being a single mom. I was so scared of being this and that and the other. And now here I am. So fear is an imposter. Do not let fear stop you. Do it afraid. Number two, there is no one path. There is no right path. So just keep doing it. Like you said, take one step after the other, put one foot in front of the other. For me, everything kind of came gushing down, and it's a children's book. So it's a picture book. So I wrote everything down at once. Then I continued to iterate. I kept changing it. First of all, it was just a book. Then it became a rhyming book. Mm-hmm. And then I shared it with different people, and they gave me all kinds of feedback. Like I said, I got an entire book from having shared the first one that I wrote down. And that leads me into the other piece of advice I would give. Don't hide. Do not hide your lights. Candles are meant to be put on a pedestal and to shine. So no matter what you think, no matter how unqualified you think you are, share. Yeah. Share with people, because feedback, no matter what kind of feedback it is always going to build you up. You are in control of how you want to interpret the feedback. If someone says, this book is not XYZ enough, take that back. Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to see if you can incorporate more of that. One of the things that I got back, so this book, I wrote it, and one of my, my sister-in-law, I wrote this book, and she's like, I like to make sure that every book I'm reading to my children has some sort of like educational or moral value embedded in there that's clear. And so with that feedback, this book now included counting lessons. And let me tell you, that is a massive selling point. I read at schools, I read at like children's museums, all kinds of things. And that counting exercise would never have existed if I did not get that feedback. So share your idea so that you can refine it. Again, you're not perfect. Yeah. And there's so many people who God has placed around you to feed your journey, your gift, your mission in one way or the other. So fear as an imposter, just keep doing a little bit at a time and share your gifts.
I love it. I love it. But so we've gotten to the end. I don't want to keep you from. I know you have 50 million books to write, so let me know. But I do want to tell the people, first of all, some of the name of your books and then where they can find you. So drop your social media, your Facebook. It's time to
thank you at internationalslayermama.com. So my name is Ada Ari, ADA-ARI. My Instagram account is ADA_ARI, and my website is www.ada-ari.com. You can find all my books there. My 2 storybooks right now are The Spider's Thin Legs and The Turtle's Cracked Shell, the Nigerian and the Ghanaian story. And then my language books are also there. I have 11 different African languages right now and constantly growing. So check them out.
I love it. I love it. And I guess let me just ask you one last question, because we're called No Longer Rugged. So I want to know what is your old, it can be about anything, an old rugged way you used to think about something and how now you found a new perspective, newfound wisdom on anything.
Being judgmental this is kind of tied into fear, because I think we're always afraid of how people will judge us. Okay. But like, I really profoundly feel this because I experienced it as well. Being judgmental is tied into being either very sheltered and like literally living under a rock, essentially, or being very young. The older we get, we're going to see so much in life. We're going to go through so many things in life that we would never have imagined ourselves going through. And by that, we just start to lose that judgment. We're like, you know what? I don't know how I might have reacted in that person's shoes, because look, I didn't think I would react in this way in my shoes. So it's kind of tied into fear, but also don't judge. Being judgmental is whack.
Yeah, right. So my sister, but yeah, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. Hopefully we'll have you back. You know me, I like to travel. Maybe one of these days I'll be in your city and I'll be like, hey, let's do a studio session. So please. It was a pleasure. I received so many great nuggets, and I'm so excited for your book. Let me even find my own ways to support. I really do hope that your books soar. And I just think it's amazing how you're leaving this legacy for your children. Your story is so beautiful. Any last words?
Thank you so much. I'm really proud of, when I saw you were moving to Colombia, I'm like, this girl. So you keep doing what you're doing as well. You're inspiring so many of us. Thank you.
Thank you.